To help save you some time building the toy app for this lesson, we've provided you some starter code that has most of the UI done using some basic code that you can usually do for yourself with the knowledge you have from the first Android course. So let's take a closer look at this code. The starter code contains a main activity layout and a recycler view layout item for the list of places that the user will eventually get to create in this app. Under the provider package, there's a bunch of classes that can help create a database and a content provider for storing a custom list of places selected by the user. To the starter code, I've already added here the API key that we obtained and added it into the manifest. I've also added the dependencies in the build.gradle file. So the ultimate goal for this toy app that we'll reach by the end of this lesson is such that a user will select a bunch of places of interest using a library called a place picker. Then these places will be stored in a local database, which we've provided for you already in the starter code. Then the app should keep watching for when the device enters those places, again here using another Android feature called geofences, which will act like a radar for any place we want and then send a notification to the user whenever such action happens. If the user enters the geofence, we'll trigger the device to go to silent, and when they leave, the device should be triggered to go back to normal. So in this exercise, you'll be building the first step by connecting Shushme to the Google Play services. So to do so, you'll need to tick off each of these items and execute them in your app. So we've already created and seen how to include the API key in our project. We've also included the dependencies for both libraries that we needed. So once we complete the 2 remaining steps, we can then connect and start using the libraries that we want in Google Play services. So our 2 remaining steps are to grant the required permissions, and then we can connect and use Google Play services. So let's start with the first one, granting our app the required permissions. Remember that this is done in the Android manifest. So first, we need to grant the internet permissions to allow the user to search and find places of interest. We also need to grant location permissions to know where the device is. So there are 2 types of location permissions that you could add to the manifest. There's access course location and access find location. So course location gives you permission to access the device's location using only network provider information from cell towers and Wi-Fi, while find location permission allows you to request GPS satellite location information for a more specific location, hence the find. Remember that Android versions later than 6 require the user to allow some permissions during runtime. And in our case, for the location permission, I'll just add a checkbox here that allows the user to request such permission. And when the checkbox is checked, it'll call activity_compat.request_permissions, which will pop up this dialog box that allows the app to access the device's location. So the code that launches the permissions request when that checkbox is clicked lives here in the main activity. Also, I made sure that the checkbox is initialized properly in onResume here. And since the user should never need to uncheck this checkbox, if the device has already granted the permission, I'll simply disable the checkbox. Otherwise, I'll make sure it's unchecked and enabled. So perfect. Now that we have an API key, the dependencies, and the permissions all sorted out, the next step is to create a client to start communicating with the API through Google Play services.